We have a really senior team, particularly for an early stage company. So across the value chain, our management team has experience in Fortune 500 companies. So we were able to leverage their talent both from a strategy standpoint, a network standpoint of reaching out to places like our global supply partners, a really good example. But as importantly, we found a group of people who can operate in a small environment. So what does that mean? They can both think strategically, but they also have to be real doers. So they have to reach way back into their career before they were managers and be able to do both in a small environment. And we found a group mainly of folks that I had worked with in the past to be able to do that.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
When you think about growth, do you have a clear sense of what activates your employees to create more growth in your company? Well, I know from my perspective, one of the most important aspects of this is the feeling of ownership. When employees feel like owners, when they have that sense of this is my company and I'm here to do something while I'm here and I'm a part of the mission, I have a good feeling of what's really I'm supposed to do with the projects I'm on, the client experience. All of that is connected to this feeling of ownership. And today our special guest is the co-founder of Force of Nature. They were number 415 on the Inc. list in 2021, but we have Sandy Posa. Sandy and I talk about the key elements of this feeling of ownership. We talk about transparency, we talk about values, we talk about mission. All of those are absolutely critical. And there's many more to it too. So you'll get the full interview if you just stay tuned in here. But let me ask you a question before you get there. Are you absolutely clear in what does it take for you to be the leader that your team deserves? Being the leader that your team deserves is very different than what you need to do next. Who do you need to be? When you can clearly state the difference between how you're showing up today and how you need to show up for your team, for your company, for the next level of growth, then you have a much better way of doing it. You have a very clear target, if you will. And this is what I do as a leadership coach and executive coach to fast growth companies. Now, I say all this to you because if you're in any kind of struggle whatsoever and where you are with your business, your leadership, your growth strategy, I'd love to talk to you and get to know you. You're listening to this podcast. I create content like this every week, 3 episodes a week for you to grow as a leader. But the best way for you to grow, and I honestly believe this, is to have a conversation with me about what's getting in your way. And that's very specific to you. It's not cookie cutter advice. It's not something you're going to get out of a book. It is literally what's going on inside you right now and your business. And identifying what's getting in your way is the key to your growth. Now, if you don't believe me, you can check out all the results we've had with clients and then the impact we're making across the organization. So if you want to have that conversation with me, just go to genehammett.com and schedule a call. Inside that call, it won't be a sales conversation. It will truly be of service to you to help you realize the breakthrough that's right in front of you. All you have to do is grasp it. I want to help you do that. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule a call. Now here's the interview with Sandy. Sandy, how are you?
I'm terrific. How are you?
Fantastic. Excited to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you, Gene, for inviting me.
Well, before we kick this off and get into the heart of today's episode, I'd love for you to tell us about your company. So what is and who is Force of Nature?
So Force of Nature is a very disruptive brand in the cleaning and disinfecting industry. And the reason it's so new and disruptive is it has a set of benefits for consumers that are unmatched in the marketplace. So let me just list them for you. First, it's an EPA-approved disinfectant. It is a cleaner that you can use on any application in your home or work, which makes it very unusual. It also kills odors. So think anything from stinky garbage cans, pet odors, things like that. And it is the most eco-friendly of all disinfectants and cleaners. We eliminate 97% of plastic. So those are all the functional benefits of the product. But what's really the most important piece is that it eliminates toxic chemicals from your home or place of work. So it has real health benefits that have become clearly more important since COVID. So that's what we're about.
I was going to say, I would imagine COVID, that was this whole thing around, sanitation and cleaning things and everyone, you couldn't find supplies. How did you guys weather that storm?
Well, we actually did quite well. So when COVID hit, we increased our business about 10x 2 months from the historical run. And we were able to get in supply chain balance with demand within about 6 weeks. And we were able to do that because we had an unbelievable global manufacturing partner that allowed us to scale much faster than, you would would think a small company could.
Love that story. I'm glad you were able to fix the supply chain. I mean, in some cases, a lot of product companies are still not able to get the supply out there. And of course, we're seeing a lot of inflation, but that's another topic for another day, Sandy. I wanted to dive into this. You were number 415 on the Inc. list. When you guys got this, is this the first time you've ever been on the Inc. list, or have you had other companies?
This is the first time.
When you got that, what was your immediate first thought of getting that high up into the list?
Well, one, I was surprised that we made sort of the top 10% of the list. So I was surprised that we got that we were up that high was the first answer. But, so other than that, it was like, what a pleasant thing to do. And we've been able to, tell our customers about that. So it's been an important part of our marketing of our company.
Well, you wouldn't have gotten there alone. And I know that you've got a team behind you. Tell me a little bit about how your team is able to create this kind of growth across the company.
Right. So we have a really senior team, particularly for an early stage company. So across the value chain, our management team has experience in Fortune 500 companies. So we were able to leverage their talent, both from a strategy standpoint, a network standpoint of reaching out to places like our global supply partners, a really good example. But as importantly, we found a group of people who can operate in a small environment. So what does that mean? They can both think strategically, but they also have to be real doers. So they have to reach way back into their career before they were managers and be able to do both in a small environment. And we found a group mainly of folks that I had worked with in the past to be able to do that.
Well, I know that's hard to make the transition from doer to manager. It's probably even harder to go from manager to I'm going to do some doing and some strategic thinking as well. Did you find that challenge?
Very few people can do it, to be honest. It takes a real person who's special to do it and has a real belief in the mission of the company to be able to step back in their past and become a doer again. So I find very few people can do it.
Mission comes up quite a bit with fast growth companies. And I paid attention quite a bit because I didn't know the importance of it until I had hundreds of these interviews with people just like you. How do you use the mission to make sure you're hiring the right people?
Well, it's the North Star of any company. And our mission is really simple, and that's to make people's homes, and it turns out their place of business, much healthier than they are today. It's a very simple mission statement, but it's very powerful in its simplicity. And so you got to find people who believe in that mission and, more importantly, believe in the product to deliver it.
So mission's a big component behind this. What else would you say factors into creating a team that you have?
Well, there's a series of attributes you look for in people and your leaders, and then that scales down to everybody who works in your company. And it starts with having the right value structure and being consistent in that value structure across every employee. Two, you have to have people in a small organization that believe in teamwork over personal. Everybody leaves this out, but you have to have really talented people to start with. So I always look for, as I always say, people who are smarter than me in their disciplines. Those are the kinds of people that I look for. And then beyond that, from how you organize it, we believe everybody should be an owner. So everybody has stock or stock options in the company. And we believe in complete transparency among our team, good, bad, and otherwise. You got to communicate them. So those are some of the things that we think make it for a good team environment.
You hit on some of the key things. It looks like you've been reading my notes about all these companies going fast. I want to go back to the beginning. You said value structure. Some people may say that's company core values. Is that something different for you?
No, I think it's a headline for the things that I just talked about, is the way I think about it. And value, I think the point you're making is good, and value can be defined a bunch of different ways. That's how I try to, and the team tries to operationalize value.
What goes into operationalizing the values?
Well, let's take one, and I'll use it as an example. So we believe customers first, period. Now, lots of companies say that. So the real question is, how do you live that day in and day out? And so to use an example, so we have a team of customer support people. So they're the front line of talking to our customers or potential customers. So they have to be, one, well-trained, but two, we give them the authority within a construct, within a structure, but pretty wide authority, but how to deal with customers' questions, issues, complaints. And, we believe that, if you have the right people in those jobs, they're going to do what's right for the customer, which in turn is right for us. So we actually allow them to break some of the rules occasionally.
Now, Sandy just talked about having a value that's customer first. I have no problem with that, but I want to make sure this is crystal clear because a lot of people have heard other episodes and know how I believe that leaders should be putting employees first. And And I do believe that when leaders put employees first, you have a better chance to have people feeling like owners. But when you have a company, you want to make sure the entire company is putting the customer first, the customer value, the customer experience. All of those things are very, very, very important, and don't confuse them. So you want to make sure leadership is putting employees first, but the entire company is putting customers first. Just making that clear for you as you continue to be the best leader you can be. Back to Sandy. I've gotten to a conversation with someone about breaking rules, and I get that some rules can't be broken, right? But one of the examples they gave me was United Airlines a few years ago drug someone off of an airplane. Do you remember that story?
Oh yeah, I do. Exactly.
And his point was, it's an example that, there was a failure in leadership. And I go, totally agree with that. Like we're totally in line with that. But I also said, I think there was a failure and there wasn't a place where these people at the gate who probably don't have that much control, and they probably escalated up a few times, and the things have to be done very quickly, right? To get on time leaving. But someone should have probably stopped it before they drug someone off the plane. And someone should have had the ability to say, I can't. Now, this is what I believe. That rule should have probably been broken. But the rule was probably written way before cell phones and videos were available. And those things went out on social media the moment that it was happening. And it was catastrophic for the brand and for the company and for just in many different ways. Is that an example of kind of being able to break the rules?
Well, it is. And, I will say this, the larger the company, the more difficult it is to do that.
Yeah.
I have the luxury of having a small company that I know everybody personally. So I trust in their judgment. Again, they've been well trained. And it's the simplest things that really make a difference with consumers and how they talk about your brand to their friends and family. So, it's simple examples. So, we have a warranty in our product that's a year if it breaks. So if someone comes in and it's, 14 months or 15 months, and you look up their, how good a customer they've been, and they've been a good customer, you go, no problem, we'll replace it. It's simple examples like that build customer first, as we're using this example, throughout the organization. So those are the sorts of things that over time make a big difference. And you see it in, reviews of our product and things of that nature, that it comes back in spades. So it's not only the right thing to do, it's good for business.
I love these examples. I want to go into something you said too, when you started out, what makes our company great. You talked about transparency. A lot of people immediately think, well, that means financial transparency. I think there's actually different types of transparency inside of our companies. How far do you take transparency as it relates to leading people?
Well, first of all, our financials are an open book to our employees. We have regular team meetings where our CFO will go through, the month results, et cetera. So that's one thing that we do. The second thing that we do is we always concentrate on the good and the bad. Because the nature of an early stage company is it's not a straight line, particularly with a disruptive product. We're trying to change long and green habits of customers. It's not a straight line up. It's up, down, and sideways. And so when you're going up and down and sideways, you have to make sure that people, one, know that's happening, and two, know that as a company, we're doing something about it, and to reach out to them with ideas to how to fix the up, the downs and the sideways. So it's both how we're doing in business, what cross-functional things are going on that they may be tangentially involved with, but are important to the success of the company. And it makes people feel like they're a really integral part of the company, which they are, if you communicate that broadly. So that's what we try to do. I would say there are times when we're not great at that, and there are times when we're really good at it.
Now, Sandy's been talking about open book financials, and that's very important. But one part of transparency is the ability for people to give feedback and really have transparent conversations, being honest with people, being direct. But these aspects of transparency are critical for your leadership and everyone else. Because what happens is something called the cascading effect of leadership. If you're avoiding these conversations, then it actually is a signal to everyone else on your team that that's what leaders do. They avoid these conversations for whatever reason. And you don't want that happening, because if enough of that happens, then you're just really going to have people that aren't meeting expectations, and you're no longer a high performance team. But if you do have the transparency of conversations and feedback, you have a much better chance to create the kind of high performance team that is necessary. And this, all it takes is great leadership. When I talk about leaders in these concepts, they really understand the power of it and they know how to execute it day in and day out. Back to Sandy. I want to go into one of those other little things before we wrap up today. And we got a little bit of time to look at this one specifically, because this is a big idea, but you've decided to create a structure where you've got stock options or something available to people where they have an ownership stake in the company. Why did you feel like that was such an important piece?
Well, for two reasons. One, people are taking a real risk coming to a small company. They're taking a personal risk because most companies fail, by the way, as you know, and so they're taking a financial risk. So I've always been of the opinion that they should be compensated for that risk. And like most small companies, there's not a lot of cash. Well, small companies are always cash constrained. You never have enough. So one of the ways to offset that is with stock options. So both from a personal risk standpoint and an ownership feel standpoint, you feel like you're an owner, and you are. So you are committed to, the success of the company. And I do mean everybody in the company. Now, again, we don't have that many, so it's kind of easy, but I think for all those reasons, it's really important.
When I first started doing the research that we're talking about fast growth companies, and you're part of hundreds of these founders and CEOs, Sandy, I didn't realize how important ownership was. Ownership kept coming up a little bit. I would ask a question that went sort of like this. With big growth goals, how do you get people to take responsibility for those goals? And your peers would come back and say, yeah, I get when you say responsibility, that's not really what we're looking for. We want them to take ownership of the goals because we want them to feel like owners. And they said this enough. And I remember I wrote it down on paper, and I'm looking at all the data, trying to connect dots. And I started speaking about this around the company, having people feel like owners. I actually believe there's certain things that you're doing and others can do without giving stock options, like transparency, like having a mission that people are all behind, that helps them feel like owners. Would you agree to that? You don't have to actually have the financial tools, that you can actually do it in other ways?
Well, I think it's all connected. Everything that you said is all connected. They're all pieces of how you build the right value structure and the right culture. So if you didn't have the sort of the topics that you were talking about how the values are set, the levels of authority that you give people, how transparent you are, those all form, the bedrock of a good culture and a good value system. Then you add in the financial incentive, and by the way, it doesn't have to be huge, and for some people it's not. It's another element that makes them just feel like I'm part of this team. So I think it's important, but it's just part of a building block.
Totally agree. I want to give you one last chance, Sandy. You've been through different evolutions, if you will, in your own leadership. Can you look back and kind of help us see something that you had to maybe learn the hard way as a leader?
I think early in my career, I was not very tolerant, I would say, and I didn't really know how to communicate very well. And those are things that I had to learn early on from a personal learning growth standpoint. If you twist the question a little bit and ask what are the most important things I've learned that have helped me in my leadership roles, it was almost from my first job forward that I picked up things from great leaders that I work with, that over time I built my own style, if you will. And we can talk about that if it's of interest to you, but I really do think the communication piece was something that I had to learn, in some cases the hard way.
I don't want to leave this undone, and I'm not sure when we'll be able to have you back on the show. So give us a little idea of how you built your own style of leadership.
So I'll give you the first example. When I was very young in my career, my boss would take me into his one-on-one meetings with his boss. And if there was a question from his boss about a certain project, and it was my project, I was the one that answered. It was really unusual if you think about it. He brought me into his one-on-one meetings with his boss for me to communicate the things that I was working on. Now that took so that was just empowering, if you can just think of it as a young people. So, and I'll use that as an example. So where I evolved that is, what I tell people throughout my organizations over time is, for you to succeed, here's a good rule of thumb. I want you to do all of your job and half of mine. And then that allows me to do half of my job and half of my boss's job. And if you get that right, you're going to be on a constant learning curve, and you're going to be ready for the next level of your growth. And just going into one-on-one meetings, your boss is a tactical way to do that. And so I've tried to tell people that throughout their careers, and it's been wildly successful because people are just jazzed about that idea. So if you're in an executional job, for example, and it's part strategy, then you're going to work your way up to be half your job being strategy while you execute, and then you're going to be ready for that next level. So that's a good example of what I learned over time that I try to attract to people. The second thing, and that also gives people more authority than their job scope. It's really, I found that to be one of the most important things that I learned early on and applied it in my own way in that sense.
Love that example. I appreciate you sharing that with us, Sandy. We've run out of time, but you've shared with us quite a bit of wisdom, and I really appreciate you doing this for being on the show.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
I want to reflect just a little bit here about what I take away from today's interview, just so that you can actually have this summarized. Being a great leader of a fast-growing company requires you to get a lot of things right. There's so much going on. I get it. I work as an executive coach in this area, and so I understand. But your job is to make sure people are aligned and having those values and consistently rolled out across the organization, hiring the right people, being transparent, and love this last thing about empowering people to do half of your work as a boss and all of theirs, so that you can actually manage your way up the scheme of leadership. And now there's a lot more to it than this, but I just want you to put are you creating this kind of space inside your company? Are you being a leader that's encouraging people, empowering this way? If you have any questions about what's next in your journey of leadership, make sure you go to genehammett.com, schedule a call with me. I'd love to talk to you about what's getting in your way of you being an extraordinary leader. This is what I do. I love to do it, and I'd love to help you too. When you think
Great, thanks. I appreciate that, by the way. Are we still being quoted? Are you still online here? Sorry.
We are still online. I'm just wrapping it up here. When you
think of
growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.